Stop right there. The piercing siren echoed like a warning bell as red and blue lights danced in the rearview mirror. Aaliyah's fingers gripped the leather steering wheel tighter, her heart pounding. She had just left the office after a long week, the polished shine of her new luxury car reflecting her hard-earned pride. But now, all of it, her peace, her confidence, her joy, shattered with the wail of a siren. She pulled over carefully, whispering to herself, "Stay calm, Aaliyah. You've done nothing wrong." The car door slammed behind the officer, heavy boots crunching against the asphalt. A tall figure approached, his eyes scanning the vehicle as though it didn't belong on that road, in those hands, with that driver. His first words carried an accusation sharper than the glare in his eyes. "Whose car is this? You steal it?" Aaliyah's chest tightened, but she steadied her voice. "This car is mine, officer. Here's my license and registration." She passed the documents forward with trembling hands, but not out of guilt, only the raw fear of knowing how fragile her safety was in that moment. The man barely glanced at the paperwork. His lips curled into something between disbelief and disdain. "You expect me to believe this? Girls like you don't drive cars like this." The words sliced deeper than any shout. They weren't about the car. They were about her skin, her existence, her right to sit behind that wheel. Aaliyah's throat burned, but she refused to break. She repeated, "Everything matches. Please, just check." Instead of listening, he straightened, hand resting on his belt as if she were already a criminal. The silence between them was filled with judgment. Neighbors peeked from porches, curious eyes prying but no one daring to step closer. Aaliyah's heart begged for someone to intervene, yet the world around her seemed frozen in complicity. The officer radioed for backup, his tone laced with suspicion. "Possible stolen vehicle. Suspect detained." Suspect. That word alone stabbed her dignity that he ordered her out of the car. The ground felt cold beneath her heels as she stepped onto the pavement. "Face the vehicle," he barked. Aaliyah obeyed, her mind racing between disbelief and humiliation. She wanted to scream, to fight, but she remembered her mother's words, "Stay alive first." The metallic click of handcuffs echoed like thunder in her ears. Cold steel bit into her wrists as she stood under the weight of flashing lights. Passers-by slowed their cars, eyes wide, but no one stopped. Aaliyah could feel her cheeks burning, not just from the injustice but from the shame of being treated like a spectacle when all she had done was succeed. She turned her head slightly, voice breaking, "Please, officer, I've done nothing wrong. Look again. The car is mine." He sneered, muttering under his breath, "I know your type." The words haunted her as she was guided toward the police vehicle. Every step felt heavier, as if the earth itself pressed against her chest. She slid onto the hard plastic back seat, cuffs still binding her, her car abandoned on the roadside. Tears blurred her vision, but she refused to let them fall freely. Not here. Not in front of him. As the door slammed shut, the world outside muffled into silence. The hum of the engine vibrated beneath her, but her mind drifted somewhere else. She closed her eyes and saw her mother's face, tired yet resilient, coming home from double shifts, telling her, "Baby girl, you have to work twice as hard to get half as much. But one day, you'll shine." She remembered nights spent bent over textbooks, while her friends partied. She remembered coding for hours until her fingers ached, landing that dream job when no one thought she would. Every milestone was a battle, and every victory tasted sweeter because it was earned. The car she now sat separated from wasn't just metal and leather, it was proof of every sacrifice, every ounce of perseverance, but now, in the back of that police car, she wondered if any of it mattered. Could success shield her from prejudice? Could hard work rewrite the assumptions etched into the eyes of men like Officer Miller? The cuffs dug deeper into her skin, but what hurt most was the question she could never escape: would she ever truly be seen for who she was, or forever reduced to what they assumed she must be? Her tears finally spilled, warm trails down her cheeks, but even then she lifted her chin, whispering to herself, "You won't break me. Not today." Her voice was soft, almost lost in the hum of the engine, but it was enough. In that lonely moment, she knew she carried more than her own dignity. She carried the dreams of her mother, the hopes of every girl who had been doubted, dismissed, or demeaned. The chains around her wrists could not chain her spirit. The police car pulled away, lights still flashing, as if parading her humiliation for the world to see. Aaliyah leaned her head back, eyes closed, surrendering to the storm of emotions swirling inside. Fear. Anger. Pain. But above all, strength. She knew this moment, this injustice, would not define her. It would ignite her. She wasn't just surviving this night. She was preparing to rise from it. The station doors closed behind her with a heavy thud, swallowing her into a world colder than the night air she had left outside. The cuffs were finally removed, but the weight on her wrists lingered as though they had branded her. Officer Miller walked ahead with the arrogance of a man convinced of his own authority, throwing quick glances back at her as if daring her to protest. He tossed her paperwork onto a desk, muttering to his colleagues that he had caught another one. The words burned, not because they surprised her, but because they confirmed what she had feared. In his eyes, she was never an individual, just a stereotype. Aaliyah stood in silence, her heart pounding with both rage and composure. She knew screaming would only feed his narrative, so she chose stillness instead, her voice steady but firm. "Please check the registration. It has my name. Everything is in order." The officer behind the desk hesitated, flipping through the documents more carefully. His brow furrowed. He glanced at Miller. "This says the car belongs to her." Miller scoffed, brushing it off with a laugh. "Paperwork can be faked. Trust me, I know what I'm looking at." The room grew tense. One of the younger officers shifted uncomfortably, his eyes darting between Aaliyah and Miller. For a moment, silence pressed against the walls until the senior officer entered, a man with lines of experience etched across his face. He picked up the documents himself, reading them with deliberate patience. The name on the license, the registration, the address, everything aligned. He looked at Aaliyah, then at Miller. His voice was calm but heavy with authority. "This car is hers. She's done nothing wrong." Miller's jaw tightened. "She doesn't fit the profile." The room froze at his words. Even those who had been silent could no longer hide their discomfort. The senior officer's gaze hardened, slicing through Miller's excuse. "And what profile is that?" The weight of the question hung thick in the air, louder than any siren. Miller stammered, his confidence cracking. "I just meant, look at the car, look at her." He stopped himself, but the damage was done. His prejudice had been exposed, naked and undeniable. Aaliyah's voice cut through the silence, calm but powerful, carrying the weight of every humiliation and every triumph that had led her here. "You didn't see me. You only saw what you wanted to see. You saw my skin, not my name. My car became a crime in your eyes because you couldn't imagine me owning it. You didn't arrest me, you arrested every dream of every girl who looks like me. But you won't break us." Her words echoed through the station, leaving Miller speechless. The younger officer lowered his gaze, ashamed. The senior officer nodded slightly, as though acknowledging not just her innocence but her strength. "You're free to go, miss," he said softly. But freedom, in that moment, felt bittersweet. She was no longer in handcuffs, but the scars of injustice clung to her. Walking out of the station, her heart ached, not only for herself but for the countless others who had endured the same. She could feel eyes on her, some filled with respect, others with quiet guilt. She held her head high, knowing she had carried herself with dignity even when the world tried to strip it away. News of the incident traveled quickly. A bystander who had recorded the roadside arrest shared the footage online. Within hours, the clip spread across social media, sparking outrage. Strangers who had never met her flooded comment sections with messages of support. Community leaders reached out, calling her brave for standing tall in the face of humiliation. Her story was no longer just hers, it became a mirror reflecting the injustices people tried to ignore. For Aaliyah, the attention was overwhelming, but it was also empowering. She realized that what had been meant to break her had instead given her a platform. Reporters asked for interviews, activists invited her to speak, and neighbors who had once only nodded politely at her in passing now stopped to thank her for her courage. She never sought the spotlight, yet it found her, illuminating the truth she had lived through. One evening, after a long day of calls and messages, she slipped back into her car. The same car that had once been the symbol of her success but had been twisted into a symbol of suspicion. She rested her hands on the steering wheel, the leather familiar beneath her fingers. For a moment, she hesitated, the memory of flashing lights and cruel words threatening to overshadow the pride she had once felt. But then she inhaled deeply, turned the key, and the engine roared to life. The sound was no longer tainted. It was a reminder that no one could take away what she had earned. Driving home, the city lights reflected off her windshield, each one a beacon of resilience. She thought of her mother waiting for her, the woman whose sacrifices had built the foundation for her success. When she walked through the door, her mother's arms wrapped around her instantly, holding her tight. "I told you, baby," she whispered, her voice trembling with both relief and pride. "No matter what they do, you rise." Tears filled Aaliyah's eyes, but this time they were not born of fear or humiliation. They were born of love, of strength, of the unshakable bond between a mother and daughter who had weathered storms together. In that embrace, the pain of the past hours began to dissolve, replaced by the certainty that she was not alone. She knew the road ahead would not be easy. There would be other Millers, other nights where her success would be questioned, her existence challenged. But she also knew she carried within her the power to turn injustice into fuel, prejudice into purpose. Her story was no longer just about her car or her arrest, it was about resilience, about refusing to be silenced, about standing tall even when the world tried to shrink her. And as she sat with her mother that night, laughter slowly returning to their home, she made a promise to herself. She would not let this moment be remembered only as her humiliation. She would turn it into her victory. Because dignity cannot be stolen, pride cannot be handcuffed, and dreams cannot be detained. She was more than what they saw. She always had been. When she closed her eyes to rest, the flashing lights that had haunted her no longer brought fear. Instead, they reminded her of the fire within her, a fire that no prejudice could extinguish. Aaliyah had risen once, and she knew she would rise again and again, carrying with her the strength of her mother, her community, and every voice that had ever been silenced. This was not the end of her story. It was only the beginning.